You're at a dinner party. Someone you've known for years just got promoted. Everyone's congratulating them, and you walk up, genuinely happy for them, ready to celebrate their success. But something feels different. They look at you and there's this distance. Not hostility, not coldness, just kind of polite detachment, like you're suddenly a stranger they're being courteous to. They shake your hand instead of hugging you. They excuse themselves quickly. You watch them gravitate toward people with bigger titles, better connections, more expensive watches. And you stand there holding your drink, feeling this hollow ache in your chest, this confusion mixed with something that feels dangerously close to betrayal. Because you remember late nights when they called you crying about their job. You remember when you lent them money they never paid back. You remember being there when they had nobody. And now that they have everybody, they don't need you anymore. You tell yourself it's just busy schedules, different life paths, natural drift. But deep down, you know the truth. They didn't drift away. They cut you off, deliberately, strategically, because in their climb up the social hierarchy, you became dead weight. And here's the part that really destroys you. You would never do that to someone. You can't even imagine looking at a friend who supported you and deciding they're no longer useful. So you're left with this impossible question. Are they a terrible, person? Or are you just naive about how the world actually works? If you've ever felt this, if you've ever been discarded by someone you helped rise, if you've ever wondered why loyalty seems to disappear the moment someone gains power, then stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just about understanding why people do this. It's about understanding the brutal architecture of social hierarchy itself, and more importantly, how to navigate it without losing either your position or your soul. Let's start with something most people don't want to admit. Social hierarchy isn't some abstract concept sociologists talk about in universities. It's the invisible structure that determines almost everything about your life. Who respects you, who returns your calls, who takes you seriously, who invites you to the table. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't climb hierarchies by being nice. They climb by being strategic. And part of that strategy, more often than people want to acknowledge, involves cutting off relationships that no longer serve their ascent. This isn't cruelty, at least not in their minds. This is what they've learned survival looks like at higher altitudes. Because here's what happens when someone starts moving up. They encounter a new reality, a reality where their time becomes their most valuable currency, where every relationship is evaluated through the lens of return on investment, where the people they spend time with either elevate their status or diminish it. And you, the friend who knew them when they were nobody, you represent something dangerous to their new identity. You represent their past, their struggles, their vulnerabilities, their former position in the hierarchy. Every time they see you, they're reminded of who they used to be, not who they're trying to become. So they create distance, not because they hate you, but because proximity to you threatens their new position. This is the first brutal law of social hierarchy. People protect their new status by severing ties to their old status. It's not personal, it's positional. Now, before you start thinking this is just about bad people doing bad things, let me stop you right there. This is about human nature operating within hierarchical systems. Because hierarchies don't just organize us, they change us. They rewire how we perceive value, how we allocate attention, how we define loyalty itself. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For most of human history, your survival depended on your position in your tribal hierarchy. Being at the bottom meant less access to resources, less reproductive success, less protection from threats. Your brain became exquisitely tuned to detect status signals and respond to them. And one of the most powerful status protection mechanisms your brain developed was the ability to distance yourself from low-status associations. Because in a tribal context, being seen with low status, individuals could drag down your own status. Your reputation was contagious. So you learned to be selective, to gravitate toward those who enhanced your position and avoid those who diminished it. This isn't modern shallowness, this is ancient wiring. The person who cut you off isn't necessarily malicious, they're running very old software that says, protect your position at all costs. And in their unconscious calculation, maintaining your friendship became a cost they couldn't afford. But let's get even more specific about what actually happens in their mind when they make this decision. Because it's not like they wake up one day and consciously think, I'm going to betray everyone who helped me. It's far more subtle and self-justified than that. What happens is a gradual reframing of their entire social reality. In the beginning, when they're struggling, climbing, desperate for any advantage, they genuinely value you. Your support feels essential. Your encouragement matters. Your presence is comforting. But as they rise, as they gain access to new circles, something shifts. They start comparing. They look at you, and they look at their new connections, the executives, the influencers, the power players, and they start asking themselves a question they would never admit out loud. What can this person do for me now? And if the answer is nothing, or worse, if maintaining the relationship requires them to code switch back to their old identity, to remember their former struggles, to feel the discomfort of status incongruence, then the relationship starts feeling like an obligation rather than an asset. They begin to construct a narrative that justifies the distance. They tell themselves you're holding them back, that you don't understand their new world, that you're jealous of their success, that you want them to stay small. None of this is true, but they need it to be true because without that narrative, they'd have to face the uglier reality. They're choosing status over loyalty. And that's too uncomfortable for most people to acknowledge about themselves. So they rewrite the story. They make you the problem. And once they've convinced themselves of that, cutting you off becomes not just acceptable, but necessary for their continued growth. Hold on. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. How many times have you been dropped by someone you helped? Not gradually drifted apart, actually dropped. Where 1 month they're calling you for advice, borrowing your time, your energy, your resources, and the next month they're too busy to text back. Where you see them posting pictures with their new circle, their new friends, their new life, and you're not even a memory in that frame anymore. If this has happened to you, if you know exactly the sting I'm talking about, I want you to leave a comment right now. Just write, I've been dropped. That's it. You don't need to tell the whole story. You don't need to name names. Just those 3 words. I've been dropped. Because when you write that, something important happens. You stop carrying that shame alone. You realize this isn't some personal failing of yours. It's not that you weren't good enough, weren't valuable enough, weren't worth keeping. It's that you got caught in the gears of a social machinery that chews up loyalty and spits out strategy. And when you see dozens, maybe hundreds of other people commenting the same thing, you'll understand this is a pattern, not a personal rejection. You'll see that the person who dropped you isn't some uniquely terrible individual. They're just another human running the same ruthless program that hierarchical systems install in all of us. So go ahead, write it in the comments. I've been dropped. Let's build something here. A space where we can be honest about the cost of other people's ambition, and more importantly, where we can learn to navigate these dynamics without becoming either the victim or the villain. Now here's where this gets really interesting and really dark. Because once you understand that cutting people off is a strategic move in hierarchical climbing, you start seeing it everywhere. You start recognizing the patterns, the signs, the predictable stages of how someone transitions from genuine connection to calculated distance. Stage 1 is the rise. They're getting new opportunities, new access, new status markers. They're excited, they're sharing everything. With you, they still see you as part of their journey. Stage 2 is the comparison. They're now in rooms with people who have more power, more resources, more status than you. They start noticing the gap. Not consciously at first, but it's there. A vague sense that you and their new connections exist in different leagues. Stage 3 is the rationalization. They start finding reasons why spending time with you doesn't fit their new life. You're too negative, too stuck in the past, too comfortable with mediocrity, too whatever justification allows them to feel less guilty about what's coming. Stage 4 is the fade. Slower responses, canceled plans, vague promises to catch up soon. They're not hostile, they're just unavailable. Stage 5 is the replacement. They've fully integrated into their new social circle. The people they talk about, spend time with, post about, none of them are you. You've been edited out of their life's narrative. And stage 6, this is the cruelest one, is the retroactive rewrite. If your name comes up, if someone asks about you, they'll say something dismissive. Oh, we just grew apart. We wanted different things. They'll erase the depth of what you meant to them because acknowledging it would force them to confront what they did. So, what do you do with this information? How do you navigate a world where loyalty is conditional and relationships are leverage? This is where most people make one of two catastrophic mistakes. Mistake 1, they become cynical. They decide everyone is using everyone, all relationships are transactional, trust is for fools. They build walls so high that nobody can hurt them, but nobody can reach them either. They turn into the very thing they despised, calculating, distant, strategic. They win the hierarchy, game, but lose their humanity. Mistake 2, they stay naive. They keep giving, keep trusting, keep investing in people who see them as stepping stones. They pride themselves on being loyal, on being real, on being different, but they end up repeatedly devastated, repeatedly discarded, repeatedly confused about why their goodness isn't enough. Both of these paths lead to different kinds of suffering. So what's the third option? The option that lets you understand the game without losing yourself to it? It starts with accepting a hard truth. Hierarchies are real, and pretending they don't. Exist doesn't make you noble, it makes you a target. But, and this is crucial, understanding the rules of a game doesn't mean you have to play it the way everyone else does. You can develop what I call hierarchical literacy, the ability to read status dynamics, to understand when someone is positioning rather than connecting, to recognize the difference between authentic relationship and strategic networking. And once you have that literacy, you can make conscious choices about how you engage. Here's the key. Don't give people the power to drop you by making them central to your sense of self-worth. When someone starts rising and you notice the signs of distancing, don't chase. Don't try to prove your value. Don't make yourself smaller to make them comfortable. Don't perform loyalty to someone who's already decided you're disposable. Instead, release them. Not with bitterness. Not with a dramatic exit. Just with clear-eyed recognition that their path has diverged from yours, and that's information, not a tragedy. Because here's what happens when you do this. You stop being the person who gets hurt by their absence and become the person who was already gone before they realized it. You shift from reactive to sovereign. And sovereignty, true sovereignty, is the most powerful position in any hierarchy. It's not about dominating others. It's about being so grounded in your own value that other people's validation or rejection doesn't shake your foundation. People can rise around you, past you, above you, and none of it touches your core because your worth isn't derived from your position relative to them. But let's go even deeper into the psychology of the person who cuts others off. Because if you've ever been on the receiving end of this, you need to understand what's actually happening in their internal world. Most of these people are running from something. They're climbing not toward something they want, but away from something they fear. They fear being forgotten, being irrelevant, being the person they used to be. Their entire identity becomes wrapped up in their hierarchical position, which means maintaining that position becomes a matter of psychological survival. Every relationship that reminds them of their lower status past feels like a threat to their current status present. They can't afford nostalgia. They can't afford sentimentality. They can't afford to be seen with people who knew them when they were weak, broke, desperate, vulnerable. because all of those states in their mind could be contagious. If they spend too much time with you, maybe they'll slip back. Maybe others will see them as less than. Maybe the fragile identity they've constructed at this new level will crack and reveal the terrified person underneath. So they cut you off not because you failed them, but because you succeeded too well at seeing them. The real them. The them before the masks, before the performance, before the carefully curated persona. And that authentic self is now their greatest liability. This is why you'll notice something particular about people who cut others off in their climb. They often become more performative, more concerned with image, more obsessed with perception. They start talking differently, dressing differently, adopting new mannerisms. They curate their social media with the precision of a political campaign. Every post is calculated to signal status. Every photo is evidence of their new position. Every interaction is a demonstration of their access. They become a living brand. And brands don't have messy, complicated, unprofitable friendships from their past. Brands have strategic relationships, partnerships, networks, connections, all sterilized language that removes the human element and replaces it with utility. They've transformed from a person into a position, and positions don't have the luxury of loyalty. They have the necessity of leverage. Now, here's where this gets philosophically interesting, because we have to ask, is this wrong? Is someone morally obligated to maintain relationships that no longer serve their growth, just because those relationships once mattered? This is where different philosophical frameworks give you very different answers. From a utilitarian perspective, if cutting off old relationships leads to greater overall success, influence, and ability to impact the world positively, then perhaps it's justified. From a virtue ethics perspective, loyalty is a virtue, and abandoning those who helped you is a betrayal of character regardless of the benefits. From a Machiavellian perspective, ethics are secondary to power, and maintaining your position is the highest good because it's from positions of power that you can actually effect change. From a Stoic perspective, you should maintain equanimity, whether someone stays or goes, because your peace shouldn't depend on external relationships. Each of these frameworks can be internally consistent, and yet they produce completely different moral conclusions, which suggests that the answer isn't philosophical, it's personal. What kind of person do you want to be? Not in theory, in practice. When you gain power, when you rise, when you have the option to distance yourself from people who make your climb harder, what will you choose? Because that choice reveals who you actually are versus who you think you are. And this brings us to the most important distinction in all of this. There's a difference between strategic relationship management and sociopathic discarding. Strategic relationship management says, my time is finite. I need to allocate it wisely. Some relationships will naturally receive less attention as my priorities shift. That's adult. That's realistic. That's not betrayal. It's bandwidth. Sociopathic discarding says, you no longer serve my purposes, therefore you have no value. Therefore I will erase you completely and feel nothing about it. That's not strategy. That's pathology. The difference is in the presence or absence of gratitude. Does the person who's rising still acknowledge, even privately, what you meant to them? Do they still feel some pang of guilt about the distance? Do they at least recognize the sacrifice you made? Or have they completely rewritten history to paint themselves as self-made, to erase your contribution, to pretend you were never essential to their journey? That tells you everything about their character. Not whether they spend less time with you, relationships evolve, but whether they've erased you from their origin story, because people of real character carry their gratitude forward even as they move up. They might not be able to maintain the same closeness, but they don't pretend it never existed. So here's your practical strategy for dealing with this dynamic, whether you're watching it happen to you or you're worried you might do it to others. First, diversify your relational portfolio. Don't make any single person or group so central to your identity that their departure devastates you. Have multiple communities, multiple sources of connection, Multiple types of relationships. This isn't cynicism, it's resilience. Second, practice graceful release. When you notice someone pulling away, don't cling. Don't make them the villain. Don't make yourself the victim. Just acknowledge the shift and redistribute your energy. Third, maintain your own standards. Decide in advance what loyalty means to you, what kind of friend you want to be, and don't compromise that based on what others do. Your integrity is not a response to someone else's behavior. Fourth, stay curious rather than judgmental. When someone distances themselves, get curious about what's driving it. Not to excuse it, but to understand it. Understanding doesn't require forgiveness, but it does prevent bitterness. And fifth, invest in yourself. Build your own skills, your own status, your own power. Not to compete, not to prove anything, but so that you're never in a position where someone else's validation feels like oxygen. Now, I'm going to give you a 7-day challenge that will completely change how you see social hierarchies and your place in them. Day 1. Map your relationships. Write down the 20 people you interact with most. Next to each name, honestly assess. Is this relationship mutual, or is one person more invested? Day 2. Identify your status markers. What are you using to define your worth? Job title, income, social media followers, recognition? Write them down. Then ask, if all of these disappeared tomorrow, who am I? Day 3. Practice release. Think of one person who's been pulling away from you. Write them a message in your journal, not to send, just to express everything you feel. Then consciously release them, not with anger, with peace. Day 4. Reverse the lens. Think of someone from your past that you've distanced yourself from. Be honest, did to them what you're accusing others of doing to you? Day 5. Redefine loyalty. Write your personal definition of what loyalty means. Not the greeting card version, the real, nuanced adult version that accounts for growth and change. Day 6. Strengthen your sovereignty. Do one thing today that reinforces your sense of self-worth independent of any relationship or status marker. Day 7. Recommit to your standards. Decide what kind of person you want to be in relationships, and commit to that regardless of what others do. Write it down. Make it a vow to yourself. This 7-day practice will give you clarity that most people never develop. You'll stop being reactive and become intentional. You'll stop being surprised when people shift and start seeing it as natural evolution. And most importantly, you'll build a sense of self that doesn't collapse when someone else moves on.